Good evening. In December, Council asked us to come back and discuss a couple of downtown improvements that included downtown high-speed fiber and improvements to the park blocks. Both of those are related to downtown, but they are much different. So our hope today really is to try to split those into two different conversations. What we'd like to do is start with broadband, provide a brief update and then answer any questions you have, and then spend some time, make sure we have enough time to spend on our
So we're aiming at this first conversation not lasting more than 30 minutes.
If that works, that's the preferred. So starting with downtown fiber, if you remember, high-speed broadband fiber is one of our Baker's Dozen, the infamous Baker's Dozen. That was basically 13 items that we came up with that we said we wanted to increase our efforts in order to advance our economic prosperity goals. And so one of those 13 is to basically move forward with high-speed broadband fiber. So that's the first item we'd like to talk about today. The good news is that I think in this case we're closer to the finish line than we are to the starting line. We've learned a lot. We believe we have a good plan for moving forward. Ann is going to provide a quick update, but we'll be back next week again to talk about funding options for a broadband plan implementation. So the goal today really is to answer any hanging questions that you have about where we're headed with the broadband fiber plan, or hear anything that you might need prior to next week's discussion that might be helpful to inform that discussion. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Andy.
I don't have any slides with my talk. I have to turn in. So as you know, the city funded a pilot project in fiscal year 2014 to connect fiber optics to 3 buildings in the downtown, providing a high-speed telecommunication connection. The goal of the pilot project was to identify a feasible method to physically connect the fiber to the buildings. Working with our partners, both LCOG and eWeb, we determined that it is technically feasible to install microduct tubes within eWeb's electrical conduit and to run the fiber through that microduct into the buildings. And last June, the fiber went into service. The publicly owned infrastructure has created a landscape where privately owned internet service providers, or ISPs, can compete for customers. The independent ISPs are now providing 1 gigabit internet service, which is the equivalent of 1,000 megabits, for $99 a month to about 20 tenants in the connected buildings. Firms in the served buildings saw the price of monthly service decline and the speed of their service increase. Based on the success of the pilot project, the city and its partners, which now include LCOG, eWeb, and the Technology Association of Oregon, have moved forward to develop a plan to construct fiber connections across downtown Eugene. The fiber implementation plan has 3 distinct elements: an engineering plan, a cost estimate, and a funding plan. The first part of the plan is the engineering plan. We've been working on this since this past August. We identified the service area for the downtown fiber network to correspond to the area where our utilities lie underground. The planning team identified this area because it covers much of the downtown, and we could design the system using the technology that had been tested in the pilot project. eWeb staff have completed the proposed engineering plan to determine the most efficient route for the fiber. The plan allows for any new development in the plan area. For example, there's capacity to allow new buildings built in the future to come into the system. The plan also includes connection points at the physical boundaries of the service area so that additional fiber outside the service area can splice onto this network in the future. The planning team have worked to make this initial network flexible to accommodate future expansion. Part of the fiber implementation plan is what we're calling the middle mile. The fiber planning team gave it that name because it provides a connection between local internet service providers and major regional service providers. It will be a publicly operated connection from a local internet connection point, which is owned and operated by LCOG, to large regional internet exchanges up in Portland and in San Jose in California. In Eugene, now there's a constrained supply of access to these regional exchange points, so our connection speed is lower and our cost is higher than in larger cities. Establishing a middle mile connection will provide access to regionally competitive rates for large consumers of internet data. Large consumers include public agencies and independent internet service providers. The connection will offer significantly lower rates than what are available today, and the lower rates will lower costs for the city, the county, school districts, other public agencies. It will also build on and enhance the benefits of the downtown fiber network. The middle mile connection could have tremendous benefits for the region. The fiber planning team is working with technical staff at multiple agencies to ensure we fully understand and can quantify the costs and benefits. The second part of the fiber implementation plan is the cost estimate, and eWeb and LCOG very recently completed a preliminary cost estimate. The fiber build is expected to be about $3.45 million. This includes the cost to lay the microduct in the electric conduit and to connect the fiber to service points within the building. The middle mile will cost about $350,000, and the total preliminary cost estimate is $3.8 million. The third part of the fiber implementation plan is the funding part, and we'll bring that topic back to you on January 20th.
Thank you. Ready for questions, right? Anybody have any questions? Yes, Mike, and then George, and then Alan.
Well, I'll just say that I brought the motion last month on acting on this now because I think this is the single most important economic development thing this council can do in the next couple of years, frankly. I think it will do more for our downtown, more for the kind of continued expansion of what's succeeding in our downtown right now than just about anything we can do. And for me, speed matters. And I don't mean that to sound trite, obviously, but it does. How fast we can get this into play, I think, matters. The city does things very effectively, very, methodically. But the timing of this, I think, matters. I mentioned when I brought the motion initially that I think I learned that from some folks with the association that it would make us one of about 10 cities in the country to have that kind of speed if we connected on the middle mile piece as well. Is that about accurate?
I'm not sure the relative speed between cities.
Matt mentioned that to me when we spoke about it. So
the TAO knows that much better than
yeah.
I do.
I think that's a significant advantage that we need to take, that we need to leverage, and that we can. And obviously these sort of things develop real quickly. So that's why I brought the motion to add the funding piece with it. Is there anything you can see that slows us down from getting this done? I mean, I heard what you said there, Denny, with regard to closer to the finish line, but I really want to know what that means in real time.
Identifying funding sources.
Right. So, and that was kind of the issue of what my motion was the other day, as I brought up urban renewal. I think that that's the best option based on what I've explored. And we're going to talk about that on the 20th. Is that what you said?
Correct.
I know there are a lot of folks that have a problem with that as a funding source for this. I know there's a lot of people with a problem with urban renewal and tax increment financing, and in a lot of ways I'm one of them. but I think a tool that's designed to add to property values by borrowing against that future value is the perfect capital tool of this, for this kind of project. I think it will return multiple fold to us in the value of those businesses that are able to have access to this, especially if we can do it in this next year. Thank you.
George?
Thanks, Mayor. So I guess we're not going to talk about money today, except in a very general way. There'll be more detailed information on Wednesday. Is there anything you can share with us right now? I can wait till Wednesday, but...
Here, as far as just a general cost estimate, sorry.
Well, that's pretty clear. What I see is $2.7 million for the build out of the planned service area, $750,000 to extend the fiber to service points within buildings, and then $350,000 initial capital cost for the backhaul connection, and then $6,000 a month from then on. All that's pretty clear. It's just, how are we going to pay for that, I guess. And we'll find out on Wednesday some of what the options are. And I just read this one sentence here on page 4. It says, the advantages are clear, and I think they are clear, of the middle mile solution. But the actual feasibility, I'm quoting, the actual feasibility needs to be justified before the investment is made. The city and its partners should prepare a careful business plan of the options. The plan would aim to secure pledges of purchases from other public agencies and local ISPs to ensure the benefits outweigh the costs. And yeah, I just want to say I think that's absolutely necessary. Actually, I guess I only have one question at this point. I see on page 3 it says the plan has identified 120 buildings in addition to the ones that have already been connected, I assume, that can be connected. And does that include most of the businesses in the service area plan? Are there any buildings that are not being counted?
We identified that service area that is in the map, that's in that 4-page summary, but we're having difficulty. The electrical conduit that lies underground on the eastern part of that area lacks enough space for the microduct to go into it, and so that's not in this first phase. And also the eWeb redevelopment site is not in these costs.
Yeah.
The engineering plan includes capacity so that it can be added in the future, but there's no place to put it quite yet.
I see. So we're kind of talking, is this roughly the area east of High Street?
Roughly the area
or
east of High
Mill,
Street.
Maybe? Mm-hmm. East of Mill?
I think it's about High is
High, okay.
the real heart of it. And there's a building here and a building there that can be included or cannot be included just because of physical issues.
Yeah, okay. Any way we could see a list of those buildings? Or maybe might be fewer buildings that can't or not being recommended to be connected. Maybe that's probably less than 120. I didn't have time to walk around and count all the buildings downtown, but I'd just like to know whichever would be easier.
I think one thing we need to do with the plan is bring it out and open it up to stakeholders so that property owners can see whether or not they're included in the fiber build. So individual buildings will be made public.
I think people are going to want to know that.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious about where we are, and I don't know if we're on that list of 120 or not. We use computers quite a bit every day at our business. So.
I just add that I think our goal really is that we have to start somewhere. This is considered to be a first phase, and there may be some properties that have technical problems initially, but that doesn't mean that over time we wouldn't be looking to solve those technical issues. The eWeb is a good example. We absolutely want to see high-speed fiber on eWeb. There just isn't the infrastructure to take it there now, so there will be a day when we can solve that technical difficulty, and I think that's the case for some of these other buildings, is there's probably a path to get there, but it might not be part of phase one because of the technical difficulties, and we don't want to necessarily hold up the project just to make those couple
You
of
mean
projects
the
work.
eWeb, the pipes aren't,
Whatever the technical difficulty might be, it might be not enough room, it may be that there's no infrastructure, those issues may vary from property to property, but the ultimate goal is to have this available citywide. We would like
Sure,
everyone to get access.
way beyond, I mean, like the whole city, way beyond the
Thank you.
initial area. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Next up is Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. So this seems to have high potential for economic development upside, and it very much is a look to the future. Can you describe who the primary beneficiaries of this would be? What types of businesses would access this and use it and get benefit from it?
The primary beneficiaries are firms that transfer large quantities of data, and those are mostly in the high-tech sector. There's a number of businesses downtown that bring up a lot of data from the internet, analyze it, and then push out a lot of data. And some of those, the firms that are in the buildings that are served, Broadway Commerce Center and the Woolworth, there's a number of high-tech firms in those buildings, and they've really benefited from it. I know there's a number of other firms that are particularly interested in the middle mile connection, because one thing it would do is sort of virtually put them next door to large cloud providers. Amazon Cloud Services are in San Jose, and if we had this connection, it would be an instantaneous way for them to transfer very large amounts of data in the cloud. And so those types of companies that are utilizing cloud services, I know IDX is one of those in the downtown that uses the cloud quite a bit, and that's the kind of that's sort of the sweet spot that would probably benefit the very most. But I've also been contacted by folks in the hospitality industry. Apparently, it's underserved for internet. A lot of folks, you check into your motel room and you use your computer, and so they're very interested in this as well.
Yeah. So, is there a broader public access to this that would expand the pool of folks that could take advantage of this beyond? So if we just built it in the downtown, could we connect the broader community, say, households and other businesses in the community, to this system by doing spurs to get access to this high-speed internet?
It's being built so that we can splice into it at the edges, but we don't have a plan at this point to move it forward. But it's the capacity is there to do that.
Right, so this would be the backbone. And then you'd be able to, does that slow it down when you do that?
You mean like by increasing the users, does it
Yeah,
slow it down? I don't
slice
think
it.
so. The fiber has the ability to really hold a vast quantity of data. I don't have a technical background, but my understanding is you just put it on a different light wave. And so you can move lots and lots of data just using different light waves.
Right, yeah, it's the closest thing to magic that I know.
And it would also be very good if we could bring this into the city, the public Wi-Fi system that we have downtown. We have a little bit of a Wi-Fi system, and if we could connect that to the fiber, we would have a really powerful public Wi-Fi system downtown.
Yeah. So is this usually funded publicly, or is it privately funded in other instances?
It varies community to community. As I've been working on this for the last year, it's amazing how different communities, everyone is doing it a slightly different way. In some communities, a company has come to town and is basically privatizing it in the long term. They own it for the first 20 or 30 years, and then after that time, they're handing it over to the city. And that's one way to do it. But
So-
publicly owned networks are quite common as well. At the municipal level, there's quite a few out there. All the time, there's more and more coming online.
So there's two models for a company coming in, putting up the capital and building this system out and charging people rent, or
Correct.
subscription to it, and then publicly doing the same thing but using public money and then charging people to access it to pay the debt service. Does there usually end up being a difference in price? That too detailed of a question? That's
I don't know the
phase two.
answer to that.
Okay. So maybe you could describe in a little bit more detail what physically we would build and buy by adding this fiber in downtown. Because I get it on a conceptual basis, but so it's running fiber cable through existing conduit to buildings and then connecting it into their systems and then having the right kind of system to go to your desk.
Yes, and so it's a hard plastic tube that's about this big, and they lie that in the electrical conduit. There's enough space for it, and there's a picture of it in here. It looks kind of like there's honeycomb in there, and in that through that tube, there's 3 of those honeycomb things fit in there, and then that is the cost of construction, is laying that microduct in the electrical conduit. That's the real cost. It's very rigid looking, but it's flexible enough so that we can just push it from vault to vault. A real advantage of this system that we've developed is we don't have to dig up the streets. In most places, they have to dig up the streets to do this. And so this gets pushed vault to vault, and then it all gets connected from the single internet connection point out to different buildings, and it's sort of, sometimes there's long arms, sort of like an artery with laterals connected onto it. Once that microduct is laid, they use the term, they blow the fiber in, and it's quite literal. They buy a fan, and they pick up the fiber and they push it. The air from the fan lifts the fiber is light enough that you can just push the fiber through that microduct. And then it fishes into the building, and sometimes getting it into the building, there's very narrow turns, and it's a little tricky to do, but they're able to push it through and pull it through in another on the inside, and then it reaches what's called a patch panel inside the building, and then from there you make connections up to individual floors. And so some buildings will be more costly than others to bring it to the individual floors. A 9-story building will cost a lot more than a single-story building. And so at this point, we're including that cost in the total cost estimate.
Yeah, I saw that microduct picture, but it had no scale. I didn't know if it was this big or if it was 4 feet
And
wide.
as soon as we, the guy at eWeb has promised me I'll have my own little example of it. I will bring it to every meeting I go to. Yeah.
Cool. And then, so the middle mile connection, that's just an on-ramp, basically?
Essentially, it's an on-ramp
Runs up and down the West Coast?
There's a large fiber connection that runs all the way, essentially close to the I-5, and we would buy our own on-ramp onto it.
Okay.
So I've got Claire and Greg, and I just want to be sure in the first round, and I want to be sure that everybody who wants to gets a first round. We may not get to a second round because we'll shift over to the other discussion. Okay, Claire?
Thank you. Thanks for the information that's in our packet. Just a few questions. So the map that's here showing the focus area study is not necessarily the map where the build-out would happen.
That's correct. Just from, as we looked at that whole area, but technical issues will make it smaller.
So for our discussion on potential funding sources, can we have the specific map of exactly what we're funding is going to cover in terms of the blocks?
Yes.
In the city? Thank you. And is there a place in this planning for the future where commercial buildings will be asked to pay to connect to the fiber network?
That's one of the funding options that we're looking at.
Okay. And then you talked a little bit about wanting to get it out to the e-website for the future, so presumably any new buildings that came online downtown would also then be in a position to connect it.
Correct.
And then folks who live downtown, residents as opposed to businesses, would they also have the option to be connected should their building do so?
We don't have an explicit agreement with any property owner yet, but that's absolutely part of the service area. There's a number of large residential complexes, and I think they're all expected to be connected to the system.
Great. Well, I do hope that this council moves forward with the project and that we do it more quickly than we were able to do the pilot project, now that we've had some experience working with our partners and the infrastructure and just the physical nature of it. I really think internet access has become such a essential part of daily life that it could be and should be considered a public utility. So I don't have any qualms about the city taking this big role in creating this network. It really is such an obvious benefit for business, but also for residents. And we have more and more folks living downtown. And I think it will secure our city's emerging position as a leader in technology development and also benefit our creative entrepreneurs, because not everyone's sending those big amounts of data or necessarily working on tech issues. Some of that is creative work that's being done as well. So it's going to help people working in other fields downtown as well. So I'm really excited about this. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Good presentation. So given the fact that we are going to be, or ostensibly, because I'm in support of this as well, and I want to echo Councilor Syret's sentiments as far as this particular level of public investment in infrastructure is concerned, my question is more to the point of the fact that in this area of Oregon, we have had a more sluggish recovery in terms of job growth. So can you talk a little bit about, or if you've done any of the analysis around the connection between this kind of public investment in infrastructure, and not just in terms of business development in the high-tech sector, but specifically around job growth and the type of jobs that will be created, and also the collateral job growth that comes from having this core being kind of created out from this particular investment in infrastructure.
We don't have specific numbers, but I'll just, if you recall, when a few months ago we had the Technology Association of Oregon here, as well as Lane Workforce Partnership, and we talked about some sector strategies work that we did around the technology sector, and they identified a handful of items that were very, very important to their success and competitiveness, and broadband high-speed fiber was one of the top things. And I think what you'd hear from the Technology Association Oregon is this is one of the most, if not the most important thing that we could do to advance the technology sector. And really this is about those technology companies becoming more competitive on a global scale, because other markets and other businesses have advantages that our businesses don't have, because they don't have as much fiber capacity and it costs more and all these other disadvantages. So really it's about competitive advantage. I'm sure there will be some quantifiable benefits. We don't know those today, but I think anecdotally we hear this is very, very important.
So even if we don't, and that's pretty nebulous, and I know that we don't want to nail you down too much on this, Denny, but in terms of where we have seen best practices in other communities, what kinds of, job creation, job growth can we, anticipate from, this investment? So, if we're talking to, U of O graduates, LCC graduates, high school graduates, people who are looking to come in from other parts of the country to locate here, what are they going to be doing, and what are going to be those job opportunities in the future? Because that's going to be one of the, major points of people who are going to ask me or email me is, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for our children? What does this mean for, the kind and types of work they're going to do in the future, specifically here? I know I've been here 30 years, and I keep hearing about the creation of this Silicon Forest, and
Shire.
Well, it used to be forest. I mean, I'm behind the times. That's elsewhere. We're the Shire up here. Okay, so but people are going to want as much in terms of those kinds of specifics as possible. So, where we can provide those numbers and the types of jobs I think are important.
Just one anecdotal. You might In the article that was sent out last week or the week before from the Oregon Business Journal, in that, Matt Sayer, who's a TAO Technology Association of Oregon director, mentioned the goal of tripling the number of tech and those types of jobs in and around the downtown, which is a pretty significant lift. And I think from his perspective and their perspective that the fiber, if we want to do that, the fiber is you have to do it kind of a thing. And so, but those kinds of jobs, I think, are the broad, full range of very professional, technical, through those that are very qualified through LCC, through those that are very qualified coming out of high school, and a variety of types of jobs that just increasing the total quantity. That means is as people's kids graduate from high school and LCC and the university, they actually have a place to stay here as opposed to needing to go to San Francisco or Seattle. And so I think that ultimately is going to make a big difference for us.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, how does that impact the CTE program at Willamette High School?
Yeah, I think eventually that it becomes a feeder source into sort of the jobs.
So just to wrap this up, and then we're going to switch over to the next item. I think this is a really important point in how we talk about this to the community. So I just want to encourage us to take some time to put some information together about what this does for the whole community and why the social equity piece and sort of the triple bottom line kind of thing. I think it's worth having that kind of information and having people all feel what is it about this that's in it for all of us, and why is it so important. So I really would encourage you to do that. I'm going to switch over now to the discussion of the park blocks. Thank you.
So moving forward on the park blocks, I'm going to bring some additional expertise to the table. But basically using the kind of the same finish line analogy, where we are with the park blocks is a little bit different relative to where we are to the finish line versus the starting line. And I guess this is a little bit more like a triathlon in that you can't really see the finish line, and it's really complex, and there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of complex disciplines involved when we talk about the park blocks. And sometimes the park blocks really even means different things to different people. Some people really only think of the 2-quarter block south park blocks. Other people really think of the 4 corners that include the Butterfly Lot and the Wayne Morse Free Speech Plaza. So one of the objectives today is to provide some interesting history about the park blocks and some current context for the park blocks. Basically, how have they been used, and how have they functioned in the past, and how do they function today? Coming out of the recent Downtown Solutions Forum, we heard a really strong desire from the community to create open space, an open space environment, really, where everyone can enjoy the open spaces that we have downtown. And specific to the park blocks, we've heard that there are some issues and some concerns from the community, issues around comfort and safety and lack of restrooms and hazardous materials and vandalism. And we've even heard from our own staff about safety concerns from those people who make sure the park blocks are clean and safe every day. Based on the direction from council that we received in December, there seems to be a call for some action on the park blocks. It's not really clear where we sit today what that might be. So really today, what we'll be listening for is what your hopes are and what your aspirations are for the park blocks. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Will Dowdy, and he'll provide you a little bit of context on the park blocks.
Welcome.
Thank you. As Denny said, my name is Will Dowdy, and I'm an urban designer for the city. Park blocks, not donuts. As Denny mentioned, I will focus on the park blocks in keeping with the direction from City Council. But you'll see that the conversation easily opens up to a broader discussion of the downtown context and synergy with our other urban open spaces. On this muted photograph, you can see the 2 blocks on the south. North is oriented roughly up, so we are in the northeast upper right corner, the Butterfly parking lots in the upper left northwest park block. The fountain is in the southeast or southwest, bottom left, and the stage is in the southeast, bottom right. First, to set the historic context, the following slides show some of the highlights in the ongoing evolution of our central public space. Over 160 years ago, Eugene Skinner and Charnel Mulligan each dedicated a portion of their land to create a unifying public space for the new community. You can see it's right on the line between their two properties. Here you can see that square in the context of the early city streets. You may have noticed that originally the park blocks were not divided by streets, but were a single square. Also see the way that it is depicted as the focal point of the surrounding properties. 30 years later, the Sanborn map shows that the large central square has been divided into 4 blocks as both Oak Street and 8th Avenue were cut through. Uses on the block at this time included a city hall, a county jail, and a courthouse. And since the 2 southern blocks are called out as plazas on this map, the implication is that these were not heavily planted, but paved open space. Shortly after, the labeling on the 2 south blocks has changed. They are called parks, suggesting more grass and plantings. Here it is in 1910. A cottage with a restaurant was built on the southwest block, the block behind where the Wells Fargo building is today. Eugene's first producer's market was located where the Butterfly lot is today. 100 years later, the farmer's market is in the same location. As Eugene grew, the cottage was rebuilt. Here it is, in, I believe, mid-50s. But by the 1950s, the park blocks are surrounded by scores of businesses. You can see that a portion of the northwest park block, if you can read very small writing that's written sideways, in the upper left is identified for parking. That same block became the site of the Butterfly parking lot in 1957. Soon after, Lloyd Bond completed his design for the park blocks, which was considered high-style modernism at the time. This photograph appears to be taken from the southeast block from the stage looking west across Oak Street. Some elements of the design have stood the test of time, but this is not necessarily the approach we would take today, considering the renewed emphasis placed on user experience and programming flexibility. And if you look, well, you can't see it here, but if you were to look closely at a very clear photograph, on the left side, the buildings appear to have the business signage running over storefronts in a row all along that block there. The park blocks have changed little in the years since. Here we are back at the aerial. As many of us have experienced, the 2 south park blocks come to life during programmed uses, particularly during the Saturday market and the farmers market, which is squeezed in and around, or in front of and around the Butterfly lot. Over the years, the park blocks have evolved substantially, but the design has been relatively static for the last few decades. The downtown context, on the other hand, has changed significantly. This is an image from the Mayor's Civic Facilities Visioning Committee in 2004. The last decade or so of visioning work has emphasized the role that the park blocks play in the connection of 8th Avenue to the river. Notice the Butterfly lot transformed into a civic space, reclaiming the original park blocks. The Park Blocks Master Plan from 2006 also reinforced the need to reclaim the original town square, to transform Park Street as a part of the square, and to keep traffic moving but slow along 8th and Oak. These ideas are a part of the Willamette to Willamette initiative, which staff began this past fall, a collection of projects focusing on infrastructure and activity along 8th Avenue to the river and back. These include conversion to two-way traffic on 8th, improved bike lanes, the railroad crossing at Hilliard, which is also part of the quiet zone discussion, shared path from Hilliard to the river, which is also part of the eWeb Park project, and other initiatives. The park blocks are the most prominent outdoor public gathering space downtown, certainly the most historic. The goal is that all of the public spaces have their own character, but together add up to a high-quality, inviting, active, safe, and authentically Eugene public realm. A downtown that in 2021 we get to show off to the whole world and enjoy ourselves for years to come. We are working on the paths between these spaces, not only on 8th but also to the Halt Center. And in fact, our cultural services colleagues are looking at a redesign of the Halt Plaza, hopefully with Project for Public Spaces, an internationally recognized nonprofit public space design group specializing in creating the best places for people. Right now, while Council is having this discussion on the park blocks, City staff is also working on 4 other prominent downtown open spaces and the way these are all a part of a system of public spaces in the broader system of our downtown. The Halt Center Plaza, as I just mentioned, the request for expressions of interest at Kesey Plaza, the City Hall Plaza, and the future park at the downtown riverfront. Before asking you for feedback on the scope, here are our last few observations about the park blocks. Today, outside of intensively programmed activities, the park blocks are underutilized. Even in good weather, it appears that this gentleman is the only one taking advantage of this space. One thing that is striking about these historic photographs is how the early design of the space invited you into it. The edges were porous, you could enter the park from any side, there were no levels or separating walls, and you had a clear vista from one side to the other. Uses opened onto the park blocks, and the use was casual and everyday. We are not hoping to recreate history, but there is an opportunity to renew or transform the park blocks so that they are an amenity and a draw for the whole community. When the world comes to Eugene, the park blocks can be a centerpiece to the experience of our downtown. Following are 5 urban design issues that impact the ability of our park blocks to be a world-class public space. The Butterfly Lot and Farmers Market. The Butterfly Lot does not contribute to the active public open space or provide a place for the farmers market. Adjacent uses. Many neighboring properties have only back doors or no doors on the park blocks. Connecting streets. Currently, the streets isolate each block from one another and the rest of the city. Accessible and inviting spaces. Beyond the technical requirements of accessibility with a capital A, this also includes the ease of access into the park blocks. Placemaking for all 4 park blocks, because the whole should be greater than the sum of the parts. A town square can be the reflection of our values as a community, an inclusive, inviting, world-class open space, showing off our bounty, and a part of our quality of life.
So just to close, again today we'll be listening for a clarification on where the park blocks discussion should go. We've been continually tweaking the park blocks in minor ways over time, but we really haven't taken a careful look at the space in close to a decade, and we really haven't made any significant changes to the park blocks in multiple decades, and that's probably 50 years or more. As we move forward, it will be important to keep an eye on the park blocks, how the park blocks really fit into the larger discussion about downtown and open space and the vision that includes Willamette, the Farmers Market, a City Hall Plaza, and other comprehensive downtown efforts that we're undergoing right now. Because ultimately the success of the park blocks won't really happen in isolation. I think success will likely be found in an environment where the park blocks, they function with a really well thought out approach that also looks at really the whole system of open spaces and places that all connect to each other. So with that, I'll turn it over for discussion.
Denny has said that they're looking to hear from you. Any thoughts you have about hopes and aspirations for the park? I'm just going to start around, and I'm just going to start with you. If you want to pass. Just work our way around.
Well, I haven't, per my normal routine, I haven't written up a response. So, I think I'm glad we're starting this conversation. I think the park blocks get great usage from the Saturday market and the farmers market and the Tuesday market. And for me, I think even just some sprucing up might go a long way to make them more inviting. But I also really appreciated the observations around the fact that there's now walls on some parts, which then limit access, and I hadn't really thought about that. So there might be space for some more significant changes as long as we still are keeping in mind some of that main use in terms of the Saturday market and the farmers market. That one picture of the fountain, I love the fountain, but it is surrounded by a lot of pavement. And so would there be a way to create more greenery while still keeping the utility that it offers by having that harder ground surface? So overall, I think the space has, great bones, so to speak, but could use a new look. So I would actually be interested in some ideas on what might be some ways to keep what works now and deal with some of those barriers that you mentioned in your presentation.
George?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree with Claire. I think it is being used quite a bit by the farmers market, Saturday market, and Tuesday market, but I would like to see it used more and more amenities for those organizations to be able to access while they're there at the park. I've always thought that the design of it was somewhat broken up and restricted to some activities. If there's some way to open it back up the way it was back in the early 1900s, I think that would be a lot better. As far as usage, I mean, we heard from the local business person here this past week, leaving just right there on the parks because of some of the activity that it goes on in the park blocks, not the organized activity that has caused some consternation with not only the business owner, but some of his customers and visitors to the community. So we've got to balance the design, the usage, and I guess regulations of that area. But historically, this has been the gem of the middle of the city that I think in the last 40, 50 years has been well underused, and I think we need to keep moving forward with some sort of design to open that back up again.
Betty?
I haven't thought of it as closed exactly. I think we need more places for people to sit, just as we do in all of downtown. I've seen people there, people who are staying at the Hilton who are wander over and relax in the park blocks. And as for that business that left, I think they said the main reason was a tall building was going in next to them, instead of just because of what was happening in the park blocks. But a part of your presentation was, you mentioned the request for expressions of interest. We were talking about Kesey Square, I assume. Okay, I wonder when there was there a decision to do that? Did council make a decision to ask for that? And why is there a deadline? And what do you expect to do after that?
No, council did not. The direction that council gave to us was you wanted more information about the proposed development that came in. So we're out gathering that. Council also asked at the time to explore more about what Ali had in mind, and so we've spent some time with him. What we thought also was, as council is gathering information, it may also be helpful to find out if anybody else had some interest as well, and therefore we did put that out. Later on this month, what we intend to do is to come to the council and say, here's what we've received, what would you like to do with it at that point? And then you will always have the option, as you've had, either to just really not do anything and then everything stays as is, or you can choose to keep Kesey Plaza as a public space and choose to do something with that, or you could choose to have it redevelop or some combination of all of that. So the choice is still the council as we move forward.
Well, I think some people think council decided we wanted expressions of interest, and they're asking us, why is there a deadline? And I would want to know that too, if there's a deadline. Why? And why would it be so soon? Are you thinking then that after that deadline comes, we will decide whether to sell the space?
I think what you'll have the option to do, what you choose to do, you can we'll provide information and you can not do anything with that and it will stay exactly the way it is, or you can choose to go in a certain direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, As you know, I think it should be saved as public space, but I don't know why, if we're asking for ideas to improve it, why we would give such a short time. It seems to me that would be a 1 or 2 year process, maybe, unless we decide to accept something that's already been suggested, like Mr. Imami's suggestion of opening the walls, which sounds good to a lot of people. But how could we rezone that as public land so that it's out of danger? Could we just would a motion be possible to rezone as public land? Could council vote to do that?
It already is public land.
It's zoned commercial, I think.
The parcel zone commercial C3, I think.
But
It belongs to the public, but it's zoned commercial, right?
right, it's publicly owned, so you don't do anything. It's not. I guess there's no danger to it. You can choose. The council can choose not to sell it.
But if we rezoned it, then we could not sell it, right? If we rezoned it as public land.
Still sell it. I mean,
Well, it would be safer.
you can't rezone it through a motion, if that's your question.
That's what I'm asking. How could we do
Through a
that?
motion.
We can't rezone it. We can't change it from commercial zoning.
You would do it through a code with a zone change. As you do all zone changes, you would have to follow the regular zone change process. But if your question is whether you can do it through a motion, the answer is no.
Public hearing.
Right, correct.
Quasi-judicial.
But we could start a process to do that
Yes.
if we wanted to.
Process is in place.
I would be interested in knowing how to do that, but for the present, it's really important not to sell it and get rid of other possibilities, in my opinion. Thank you.
George?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. Regarding this request for expression of interest, did I hear you say that there was another one that was issued for another property besides Kesey? I thought I heard something about the City Hall Plaza.
No, I'm sorry. I was making a list of the other public spaces that the
I
city is
see.
working on in some way.
Okay, I just misunderstood what you said. Okay, thank you. Can you tell us what the status is about any talks that the city might have been having with the county regarding the butterfly law? And
Yeah, those,
public market. and all
actually
that.
for the last 12, 18 months, that conversation has been off and on, and it's really a couple things are tied into that. The county has gone and did an initial feasibility study around a courthouse and what size of courthouse would be needed and some of those attributes around that. They and the farmers have continued to express an interest in a year-round farmers market. Neither the county or the city has decided where specifically that needs to be. And so as they've gathered information, we've been in conversations with them around farmers markets. Some of those have included the butterfly lot, as we've had some conversations here as well.
Okay, so there's no firm plans. There's no firm.
There
idea.
isn't any firm plan. Any firm plan the council would have to approve
Right.
going forward, particularly if it involved any sort of public property at all or city-owned property.
Yeah, well, my understanding is that I think the major problem with that whole thing is that the state of Oregon is now responsible for building new courthouses, not the county. Is that correct?
I don't know the details of that. I know the state is engaged somehow in the financing of some of those, but I couldn't tell you the specifics of that.
One of the commissioners explained how that works to me. And unfortunately, the Lane County courthouse rebuild is down on the list. And at least a year ago, it was way, way down on the list and was out of the state's consideration for funding. So that's probably going to take a while. I know we're going to talk about funding all these ideas on Wednesday, but I just want to remind everybody that the Downtown Urban Renewal District plan has allocated $500,000 for improvements to the park blocks. My suspicion is that was just kind of thrown in as a feel-good thing, so people wouldn't be angry about the new plan. Also on that plan was funding the Veterans Administration clinic if they chose to buy the Peace Health site, which they chose not to. So that was subtracted from the plan. So all the other things are taken care of in the plan. This is the one thing that we can do. I mean, the one source of money that's available, and the Downtown Urban Renewal District will sunset in about 1.5 or 2 years. And so if we want to use that, we should. And I think there's some things we can do that would be very, very useful. More modest than the master plan, of course. That's going to be something that's going to cost many millions of dollars and take many years to tie it all together. We could buy a Portland Loo, at least one. Have a Portland Loo. We could have ramps for handicapped people to get up those steps, or we could level it and have it with no steps and get rid of a couple of walls. There are some simple but significant improvements that we could make with that money, and we should use it or we're going to lose it. So,
Mike?
Thank you. To say that the park blocks right now are underutilized is a vast understatement. I think there's a golden opportunity sitting there. That's why I included it too in the motion from last month. 150 years ago, Charles Mulligan's widow and Mary Skinner donated all that land for two purposes. One was for a county courthouse, and the other was to be the city's town square, to be the central public area of our community. And I think we're standing in front of a golden opportunity here. Now, there's two things that are important to me about this. Number one, I don't think any of us should decide what goes in there in the way of amenities or what it looks like or what its usages are. From my personal perspective, I think the farmers market's worked for 100 years. I think it works better than it ever has. And from my perspective, you should tear down the butterfly lot and expand the farmers market as much as we can afford to do. I think that absolutely draws people, and it should be bigger, and they should have more of the resources they need to make it more successful. But we have an opportunity to bring in the whole community to create a town square that belongs to everybody. Right now we have a space that many people use very well and very regularly, but some people in our community never use, ever. And this is an opportunity for us to go into parts of North Eugene, parts of West Eugene, parts of South Eugene too, and say, what would our town square, what would the utility of our town square be like that would be very attractive to you? What are some of the amenities it would have? What would its functions be? So that we're engaging, and I think the process of engaging the community well creates a space that can be utilized. As George mentioned, the county's going to probably get an opportunity to have some of their space rebuilt here as time goes on. They didn't do as well at the state funding as they probably will in the next year or two. Our city hall is going to be new, and the riverfront's going to be new. And that's the second piece. I think we ought to talk about the public engagement process as a comparative, or as a complementary development to what we do with the riverfront. What can be served there that can't be served at the riverfront, and vice versa, and how do they complement one another? How do we build these public spaces that serve everybody in our community and serve as a real showpiece and a central square for the whole town? And I think that everybody, as many people as we can in our town, ought to participate in talking about what that looks like. So that's my view.
Ellen.
Thank you, Mayor. And, the park blocks haven't been updated in a long time. I like the history lesson. That was very fascinating to me. It was also interesting to look back at the different versions of it over the years. It is really well used on weekends, but it's dramatically underused during the weekdays. So it has this kind of two lives to it. The butterfly lot seems to detract from the park blocks dramatically. Parking lot doesn't seem like the best and highest and best use for it. The actual park block, especially the south west section of it has a lot of access issues with sight lines and walls and steps and all that kind of stuff that I think sometimes is problematic as opposed to amenity. But one of the biggest things about the park blocks for me is, unlike Zocolos or town squares or greens that we see in the East Coast or in South America, Central America, or Europe, where they have all their businesses kind of facing into the park blocks, and that becomes the large amenity. This one has all the backs of these buildings where they put their garbage out, and where we park cars are on the park blocks, and it just doesn't seem to make sense. I'd love to see us look at different ways of thinking about that. Maybe I don't even know that the Park may add anything to this. Maybe that could be used to create businesses that look out onto instead of use it for the modest access it does and parking that it provides. But I think we do need to have this kind of discussion about what do we want, what do we need, and what kind of amenities do we want to see in our downtown, and I think that. And the park block should be part of that discussion, but I think it needs to be a broader discussion than that. I think we need to do an assessment of park needs for the downtown core area for now and in the future, and have that be a broader process. And add Kesey Square into that, add the Holt Center Plaza into that, the new City Hall Plaza. What about the rest of the site at City Hall? It seems like what we're doing is piecemealing this, and it has no coordination, and it has no sense of what we need or what we want to have this all be coordinated, which it should be. And we're looking at each one of these in isolation, and I think we should do it rather holistically and in a more coordinated fashion. And that way we can actually have a conversation about what do we want and what do we want to see and what kind of amenities we want. That would then help me figure out what the park block should look like in conjunction with all the rest of the open and park space that is downtown, and what the needs are that we're going to have. Because we do have, I don't know, how many, do you have a number of how many thousands of new people living downtown there were 10 years ago? It's probably
There's a couple of thousand that just live downtown, so I think, but yeah, between people living and working downtown, it's significant. It's in the thousands for sure.
Yeah, and we haven't looked at that, I don't know, ever.
Chris.
Thank you. I'm extremely appreciative of this conversation. One of the things that struck me when I was looking at the slideshow was how many of these slides showed the park blocks, and as you pointed out, with nobody in it. Aerial views, flat-on views, three-quarter views, and maybe one person, maybe two people. As you pointed out, we've literally turned our back on the park blocks, commercially as well as in terms of activity, and that's just really unfortunate. We have almost two large full blocks that have, for a large part, been ignored for decades. And it's not malicious. It's just we have kind of forgotten. We've turned our backs on them. And for me, really, the discussion about the park blocks is about the notion of how this community approaches public engagement. And engagement in a community, I think, is extremely important. It's part of what our really strong conversation is right now. Are we doing engagement? Are we doing it well? Are we turning our back on it? And when I think about the park blocks in terms of the uses that should be done there, what I think engagement should be, it should be a social space where people can be social and interact socially and come together socially. It's what shopping malls turned into, but that shouldn't be the social interaction space. It should be your downtown core. It should be display space. I mean, I don't see any displays going on there. I mean, granted, the weekends, it's used, but then everything dries up and goes away. It should be display space where we can display things. It should be performance space or event space. And other than the market, what kind of performance goes on there? You know, there could be Shakespeare in the Park. There should be all sorts of things that could happen there. A public forum. Right now, it's not used as a public forum. They might do an occasional gathering, but it's not even designed to be public forum space. And it should also be relaxation space. And right now, with the way the rules are set up and the way the barriers are in place, it's actually a hindrance to relaxation because you have to climb over walls or find a bench or you know, it's actually been almost crafted to be uninviting, to discourage. And then it needs to be casual retail space, which that's the one piece it does really well. But I think you have to incorporate all these other engagement aspects. And so for me, it's not a quick fix. You don't spend a few $100,000, knock down a wall, and you've fixed the problem. While I think that's a good start, as has been mentioned before by Alan and others, we need to really approach this as a blank slate. What could we really do to make this effective public engagement space? Social display, performance, forum, relaxation, casual retail. Those are all the enormous potential we have with what currently is a part of town that people don't even think of. They don't even remember it anymore. And that's just so unfortunate that we have a huge area that could be well utilized near what are going to be some very important new buildings. We need to take advantage of that.
Great.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to slightly disagree with Chris. We don't have a blank slate. What we have is we have pieces of downtown that have had intense investment and development over a number of years. And that's been purposeful. What we need is, from what I can see, is a 30,000-foot level look at this and look at it in terms of continuity. We don't want to turn this into a Fellini movie where nothing is connected. What we want to do is, I think, try to make sure that we have a certain level of continuity with the space flowing from what our investments have already been in the commercial sectors of downtown to what the public engaged spaces look like and how all of that stuff fits together. And I don't think we're beginning to have the edges of the conversation about what that really looks like. So, in other words, what does the totality of downtown look like, going from, say the west end of downtown through 6th, 7th, 8th, 11th Streets, all the way over to the university, and how that is a continuum that makes sense for public usage and for engagement of all the constituencies that potentially can use the space. So whether it be for business usage, whether it be for general public citizenry usage, whether it be for commercial usage in terms of tourism and travel, how can we be able to, reconfigure some parts of it? Because some pieces will look, maybe we do a facelift of the park blocks. Maybe it's a nip and tuck situation where there are only parts of it that need to be adjusted, and we save the, main thrust of it. We may, as Betty says, or Claire, I forget which one of you said it, but, remove steps, create more inviting spaces, less barriers. But there's several things that we need to look at. So I think that we need to take a high-level view, and we also need to do major public engagement around what this looks like. And we need to do, the main thing is build continuity with the investments that we have already made.
So one of the things that I heard when I went to, I just want to say this because of George's comments, that I went to hear the State of the County speech, and part of that, Commissioner Bosevich, in his comments, really pointed out the county's commitment to the farmers market. So I was very happy to hear that, because I think that is a spoken enthusiasm for finding a way to make this work, and I think that's very promising for us all. When I look at the pictures today, I have to say the thing that and I've heard this all these years, people long for more green space downtown. They long to have a place that draws you in, that just makes you want to be there. There's a lot of hardscape. And then I totally agree that we need to be looking at the entire community. I know for years we've talked about the downtown plan and the great streets, but the thing that always bothered me about the great streets, it's sort of that thing about the great street is to get you from one place to another, as opposed to I love being here. It's just a... And I think we have to look at all these possibilities in front of us with the city hall, with our looking at the plaza, with our looking at the park blocks, all of these places. We have to look at what they make together that will make our city more inviting for everybody to be in. And Mike's conversation, other view about community, I just want to say, when we think about this, think about our kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in our entire downtown right now that's appealing to children. And we want our downtown to be appealing to everybody. So it should be beautiful. You don't want to miss going to our downtown. It's sort of like when people come here and they go to the Rose Garden. They got something they want to, there's a destination. They want to see something that makes them feel really, really good. I think we have to have that kind of thought about that. We've got the utilitarian part, we've got the part that we want economic success, but I think we want that sort of human success as part of our downtown as well. And then in terms of the free speech thing, I think it's there. It's just not connected. I mean, you've got the Morse Free Speech Plaza just sitting there. So it's just a matter of making it feel like a whole instead of we have to have one and you have to have one. I don't really think it has to be we have one and you have one. I think we all have one. I mean, that's kind of the way it's supposed to, and we can work that out. And then the other thing is we have some really big treasures of outdoor art buried out there that nobody really knows or understands or knows the history of, and they need to be brought out and re-embraced by the community as well, and we're planning on adding more to that. So these are all such great possibilities for us. And this is something that we should actually be very excited about. That this is just the beginning of sort of opening that door, but I think it's really an important thing about the kind of community, how it feels, not a place you want to get through or who do you want to avoid while you're down there. It's really about a good place for everybody, where we can all enjoy and share our public spaces. Yes, George.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, you know, I had never really reviewed the park plan, the master plan. I did over the weekend and today, and I don't know when the last time y'all have looked at it, but I would recommend looking at it again. Pull it up. It was 2006 because it speaks directly to a lot of things that we've been saying around the table. I mean, directly to it. Connectivity with the rest of downtown, phasing it in. So I would just encourage people to do that. I want to keep reading it myself. Some of the drawings are really, really cool. How we're going to get there, who knows? But they look really neat, and I think it'd be a good thing. As far as being underutilized, yeah, it is, but I use it quite a bit in good weather. I sit there before I come to meetings. And I have seen families there with small children playing in the fountain in the midst of homeless people and street people, and so people do use it. They're not some people are not intimidated by different kinds of people. And like today there were very few people there. Why? The benches are wet. It's colder than heck. The rain was pounding down. You could say that about any park in town. I've been to Alton Baker Park when my boy was real young, and my wife and I, and he went there to feed the ducks, at the duck pond, and we were the only people there. It was raining. We went anyway. But so, I mean, that's part of it. It's not just that's an issue. A lot of the parks, they're underserved, underutilized in bad weather, and we have bad weather here. So some kind of covering, at least for part of it, might be something to think about. Thanks.
Alan?
Yeah, I heard a lot of people say a lot of similar things around looking at this holistically and getting it a little bit more a connectivity between all the different pieces, parts. So I was wondering if you guys staff has thought about that, and if we were going to dust off the 2006 plan, or how would we go about together a process that would connect all these dots and make this a parks needs base. What do we've got a lot of new development since we've done those plans, and a lot of people living down there, and we've got probably a lot of SDC money that could be used to do some of that park stuff. So what would be some of the ways that we could investigate that?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right about the timing is right. I think the good news really is that we're not starting from square one. We have been working on Willamette to Willamette. That's a planning effort. We're talking about Kesey Square. We're talking about the Riverfront Park. We're talking about a city hall and a plaza. The Holt Center is talking about their public plaza. And so it feels like a lot of those have already started in some respects. So again, we're not quite to the finish line. So I do think the timing is right, and I don't think we're necessarily. The good news is I don't think we're starting from square one. I think there's a lot of efforts already underway, especially given to 2021 and our hopes to bring forward some action items that really make downtown great when the world's experiences Eugene. But I'll let Will maybe talk a little bit about where we might start, I guess, in that process.
Well, I think that actually that the ideas that you've talked about all indicate the places that we need to go. The one really important place to start is a needs assessment, and I'm not sure exactly where the work that Parks is doing stands. You may be more familiar with that than I am, but I know that they are doing needs assessment throughout the city. So that will be one place that I agree becomes an important place to start. The public engagement for something like this that really does belong to the whole city, beyond just the people who happen to live or work the closest to it. It's a very different kind of public space than a neighborhood park is, or ball fields that are serving a certain region or a rec center. So working throughout the city to do public engagement would also become another important part. I think that the way that most design processes that I'm familiar with run is when you have done both of those, often your path becomes quite clear, because you understand where you need to go and you understand what people want, which is part of where you need to go. And so then at that point you can look at the difference between where you are now and where you need to be.
Yeah, I think that needs assessment is probably a good place to start. I think you've got a lot of new people down there, and you've got all these looks at different little pieces, parts, but it's not pulled together in a coordinated fashion. And I also agree with what the mayor said about there's not enough green space down there. We got a lot of hardscape and some of them are nice, but especially the one on the north side of the Holt Center, I think that's a spectacular little spot. It's kind of a mix between hardscape and greenscape. But what are all those needs that we need down there, and how do you connect what we're doing with the Riverfront Research Park and that build out of potentially that park area, connecting through 8th back into the park blocks to Kesey Square to over by the Capstone, where there's a ton of people.
Betty?
Thank you. I think George made a good point about the weather. I'm in Amazon Park every morning early, about 7 o'clock, and sometimes I'm the only person there, except because I have my dog with me, but except for bicyclists speeding through, and you can't expect a park to be full of people sitting around on the grass when it's muddy. As for the downtown parks, I think they could use a lot more color and more places to sit. A gazebo with a picnic table under it would be nice, or with a couple of picnic tables. And I don't think we have any covered space where people can sit easily. And the Free Speech Plaza out here, it really disturbs me that every Saturday part of it's fenced in. And that is, I think, a very unfriendly thing. While we talk about, I'm not too fond of talking about when the world comes here. It's like when I was a kid and they say, what if company comes? I think it should be for the people here. But it would be more welcoming when visitors come if we didn't have a tall fence anywhere. and back to Kesey Square. I think that could be, well, all over downtown, we need places to sit. They've disappeared. And many people have told me some people have trouble walking or standing for a long time, and they want to sit down. People with little children want to sit down with the kids for a while. And it's not inviting if you can't ever sit or pause unless you go into a place and spend money. And I think for the people who want money spent, if people had a place to sit and talk for a while, then they might say, let's go get a cup of coffee and go into a restaurant, or they might say, let's go get a glass of wine and go into a place that we've opened up onto Kesey Square through the brick wall. Thank you.
I think Betty's conversation is a good one, because every time we try to say we're talking about the park blocks, we end up talking about everything else, because it all fits, it's all part of the same conversation. And you can't have one conversation without having the other and thinking about how each affects the other and how each might lead you to the next one, right? And those kinds of things. So I think it's a really important conversation, and I do think this the community forum that we had before Christmas,
December 2nd.
has a lot of the same information in it that can inform this discussion and inform many discussions, where we really did hear from almost a couple hundred people, an overflow crowd, about things that they would like to see in our downtown. So that too will be shared in the next week or so, and can help inform this discussion as well as many other discussions. And I think you'll find no surprises. You'll find everything that you've said sort of confirmed. And so we have a lot to work with, as you said, Denny.
I want to add one more thing. One of the things that we've started is a conversation with Project for Public Spaces to look at the Holt Center Plaza. Tommy Anderson has been working with them. And Project for Public Spaces has looked at successful and unsuccessful public spaces all over the world. It's what they do. It's their expertise. And so we might consider bringing in some outside expertise to look at what's not working, what might work, what needs are out there, and helping us with some of those. So when we come back next week, that might be one of the things we might want to elevate as far as the discussion as well.
There are people who do a lot of
Could be someone else,
innovative
too.
thinking about these things, and I think that could be really helpful to our conversation. Anybody else? Thank you, everybody. See you at 7:30.
Any?